Hi, and welcome to part 1 of a series of videos looking at working with SPSS custom tables. Now, if you're new to custom tables, perhaps you've looked at this functionality in the past and maybe find it confusing, then this is a good place to start, especially if you want to understand how to create tabular reports or customized table output in SPSS. You may be aware that custom tables is in fact an optional add-on module to IBM SPSS Statistics Base. However, it's also the most popular module, and as a result it's often bundled with SPSS. So there's a good chance you may already have this optional software installed in your copy of SPSS. In which case, let's take a look at where you can find it within SPSS Statistics itself. So here in SPSS Statistics, you see I've already got a file open. And if you want to find out if custom tables is installed in your copy, you'll see it by going to Analyze, down to Tables, and there's custom tables showing that that particular module has been installed. If I click on it, it opens up this main dialog. And in a few moments we're going to start looking at how we can build basic tables using the custom tables dialog and introducing you to some of the quite rich functionality in there that allows us to create tabular reports. But before we do so, let's just look at the problem that custom tables solves. If I go to Analyze here and go down to Descriptive Statistics Frequencies and I ask for, say, a frequency of the variable job category here, I can drag that across. What can I do to actually change the appearance of it? If I click OK, it just produces this very basic chart. You can see there's a frequency, percent, valid percent, cumulative percent. What if I don't want them included? If I call the frequency dialog up again and go to Format, the most I can do is I can change the order of the values. I can ask for descending counts. I could suppress tables with many categories, but it doesn't really allow me to change much. I could highlight certain values using the style button, but I can't suppress or switch off some of the output here. I can't switch off, for example, valid percent or cumulative percent. To do that, I'd normally have to click on the columns themselves and maybe delete them or move them around if I wanted them in a different order. But it's all manual, so that's not very productive if I'm trying to create a lot of tabular output. In the same sense, if I went to Analyze, down to Descriptive Statistics and call it Descriptives, and I wanted information on things like some continuous variables here, and went to Options, I can switch certain things on or off. I can't really change where they appear. I don't seem to have an option here for a median. If I want to show a median value or trimmed mean, I'd have to go and look at other procedures to do that. It's quite limited. It's kind of a vanilla output, if you like. So custom tables allows me to create quite complex tables, more complex than things like crosstabs, for example, which just look at usually categorical fields. It allows me to mix continuous variables with categorical variables, to have subgroups defined, to create my own subtotals, to have a high degree of control over the labeling and the appearance of the table. So let's have a look at some of the basic elements we need to understand before we start actually creating custom tables. So to do so, let's return to the custom tables dialog itself by going to Analyze, Tables, Custom Tables, call that dialog up, and we can see it's comprised of a large canvas area here where we can drag and drop variables onto it. And the other thing is that when we click on variables, you'll notice that within the source variable list here we have this little extra window labeled categories. That basically is for previewing categorical variables. Categorical variables tend to have value labels attached to them. So if the variable has value labels, we can see the value labels in there. So we can see it for the variable here, employment category. Same thing for gender, of course, and minority classification and current salary. It's just quite useful because it obviously allows us then to anticipate how many groupings, how many categories we're going to see when we start to create tables from that. And the next thing is to introduce the concept of the canvas itself. We can click on these fields, drag them across and drop them in. So there's the variable gender. Here's the variable employment category. Notice employment category can go into rows. If I click on rows, it's just going to create a very, very basic frequency table showing just the count. We can add in other values, of course, the percentages, etc. We'll look at that in more detail later on. But if I click OK at that point, it just creates a really simple little custom table here. showing just the variable employment category and just the count of each value, each level within that variable. In the same sense, I can move that variable and move it across and have these categories represented column-wise. So that goes into the columns dimension. Click OK, and as you might anticipate, if we wanted to then cross-tabulate that by another variable like gender, then we could put 1 in the columns and 1 into the rows. And now we have a really basic cross-tab showing gender against employment category, with each of the cells just as count. There's no totals or anything like that. There's no percentaging. It's just really, really basic vanilla table. Click OK at that point. And in this fashion, we build up our custom tables, specifying each individual element as we're going along. Now, the next thing we want to introduce is this concept of what we call stacking and nesting, and the fact the way in which variables are treated when they're in the same dimension as another variable. So here we have two variables in the same dimension, both in the rows variable here. You can see this is stacked on the end, and this is, if I move this variable, so it's a subset of gender, it is nested. Stacking and nesting is a fundamental concept with regard to how we build tables up in custom tables. Stacking refers to when the variables are effectively independent of one another within the same dimension. So here gender and current salary are both in the rows, but they're independent of one another. One's not a subset of the other. Same thing here with minority classification and age of employee. This is age is independent of minority classification. It's been stacked side by side. If you just move these variables around within the canvas, however, if I move salary so that it's slightly towards the right side of gender, then it becomes nested. It's nested within the variable gender. It is a subcategory of it. And in the same sense, if I move age of employee binned within the variable minority classification, if I just move it beneath it, it effectively is nested within that variable. So stacking and nesting, very fundamental concept with regard to how tables are built. And that means that we can build tables that have stacked and nested variables within the same table. To do so, as an example, we'll go to custom tables again. This time, let's pick up the variable gender. Let's have employment category stacked on the end of that. Let's pick up the variable minority classification. And let's have something like current salary nested within that. Nested within that. Click OK at that point, and we have a table where salary is nested within minority classification and where employment category is stacked on the end independently of gender in the rows dimension.